But without further ado, thanks, Ray.
Good morning. Thanks, everybody. Is the volume okay? Good. So I know almost all of you, if not all of you. So if you haven't met me before, or we haven't seen each other, I'm Ray Estes. I'm the current chair of the school committee. Really pleased to be here. I have 4 children. They've all gone here. I have 2 still here in 3rd and 4th grade. Sarah and I have been on the Cape Cod field trip a couple times together. I have 1 more coming up next fall. So looking forward to that. I'm sure that there are a lot of questions you have. So in my mind, coming here, this is part of kind of an annual community outreach endeavor that we do to all the schools, PTO groups, Newcomers Club, Mothers Club very often. Sometimes we go to Linden Ponds, different groups, to talk about what's going on in the schools, talk about the school budget, which we're knee-deep in right now, talk about particular initiatives that we've been working on. All of you have been hearing about the full-day kindergarten initiative that we've been working on for probably 2 years now. And so in my mind, talking about, okay, budget, where we are, give you an update, full-day kindergarten, but obviously there have been some things going on more recently. So I'm happy to talk about that stuff up front, because I'm sure you have questions. So great to see everybody here in this building. Obviously, it was disappointing to have to keep it closed yesterday. That was necessary because we were not able to get Monday evening the documentation from the engineers to the building commissioner so that the building commissioner could sign off and declare the site safe for occupation. So obviously, in the abundance of caution, safety of the children and the staff, we were not able to open yesterday. Folks are often concerned about the timing of some of those notices. I was just telling Sarah, I think that, or Mary, that that decision was made very late for a particular reason. I will tell you that I came into central office at 6:15 on Monday night. We had a school committee meeting at 7:30. Dot Gallo, superintendent, was at her computer typing the X2 message which said, all schools will be open tomorrow. In a half an hour, that changed. And it was because the documentation we were waiting from the engineer, which is right here, did not come and was not worded correctly, was not in the proper format, did not address all of the areas it needed to address. And the building commissioner, who was very ill and off-site but available, was not comfortable, understandably so. So that's why the lateness of the decision. Could an announcement have been made earlier with respect to the other 5 schools? Yeah, probably. But the fact of the matter is, and I think folks don't really have a true appreciation of this, we run, essentially a $43 million business right now with a very skeletal administrative staff. And that's purposeful, right? We don't want to have our money in administration. We want to have it in the classrooms. And when Dot Gallo and John Ferris and Ellen Keene and Liz Flynn, when I tell you that they're working on things, stopping what they're doing to sit down and type a message to 4,300 parents in the middle of trying to get something accomplished is not always easy to do. So yeah, would it be great if we could have more frequent updates? I will tell you, I think Chuck's updates were terrific. And I made sure that I sent those around to a number of people during the day who were not part of the PRS community, so they would get an understanding of what was going on. I thought they were terrific and really appreciated those. So the decision was made very late, and it was unfortunate that we had to close yesterday. That obviously brings us into a whole other topic of discussion about snow days and makeups, and now it's an uneven situation with the other 5 schools. And we can talk a little bit about that because we've begun that discussion. So, as you know, everything here is safe. There's been shoring put up that's temporary. There'll be some further, more permanent temporary shoring installed. The library will be closed until further notice. A portion of the office has been blocked off. But otherwise, the building is safe. All the snow has been removed, icicles cleared from the walkways and the fire lane around the building. When I tell you during the snow removal efforts, all these windows created a blackout situation, getting all the snow off the roof, all the way up the windows, all the way in here. It was a remarkable effort by our custodial staff, our administrators, and frankly, you know, a slew of hired hands from out of town who spent the weekend, even overnight Saturday into Sunday, removing snow. I mean, I came up on the roof on Sunday afternoon, and it didn't look like there was much going on. Walked over to one section, and there were 35 guys removing snow. So when I tell you it was a huge effort, a coordinated effort, really appreciative of DPW for lending their large equipment, because that was necessary to clear, particularly the fire lanes and around the building, and get the snow off site, because there really is no place to put the snow. You can see from parking, there's no place to put the snow. And that's a consistent situation throughout the town. If you've been to the bathing beach, you've seen that, that mound there. I think there's one at Carlson as well. Hopefully the sun will shine, the snow will melt, and we'll get through this. So that's the situation here. I'm happy to take any specific questions on PRS before I move on. Yeah.
Okay, so we were told that it was just a paperwork formality. The school wasn't open on Tuesday, but it took all day. So there's definitely lots of people wondering what took so long, if it was just a question of a sign-off.
Sure. So
Seems like something went wrong bigger than we know about, and that information about will be told things on a need-to-know basis.
Right.
Everybody feels like they need to know.
Right.
And they need to know now.
Right, so let me answer that specifically. So Dot's comment about need to know on that is, if she constantly, and I will tell you because she'll hold her BlackBerry and walk around, and we all have phones and we get messages constantly. We live in a instant gratification society now. We live in an instant communication society now. I'm at work and I'm trying to do work for a particular client, and somebody else calls and they can't wait 5 minutes. They need an answer right then. And I understand that. I understand that. We all want to have the best information we can as soon as we possibly can. But if Dot were to stop what she was doing and answer all of those messages, and I'm talking hundreds and hundreds, then she would never be able to get any work done.
I've never left her one message.
I wasn't
once.
suggesting.
But that's not what I'm talking about.
I understand. I'm going to finish the, so the issue was, and this is the sign-off documentation that was provided by the engineer. There were actually two pieces of documentation that were necessary. So number one was the initial engineer was called Gale Associates, who did the assessment of the buildings on Thursday when the issue first arose. They are not insured to provide engineering services and design for shoring efforts. So we had to enlist another structural engineer who could design the shoring that our shoring contractor could install. So that's this other engineer. So we needed to get not only design from one engineer, we had to get the shoring installed, then we had to get kind of a certification that it was installed appropriately and all measures were taken that would make it safe. And then we need...
Was it all done on Monday, or part of it was done on Tuesday?
So the shoring began on Saturday late. I'm sorry, Friday.
A lot of people are wondering what happened all day Monday.
Right.
That's all I'm trying to find out.
Sure. So all day Monday was dealing with the two engineers, getting the documentation appropriately worded and coordinated so that one engineer made the other engineer happy and satisfied, and that engineer could then produce a document, which he didn't produce until 5 p.m. yesterday, okay? That would then satisfy the building commissioner.
So it was all paperwork. There was no further tweaking being done. There were no further
So,
corrections being made.
yeah,
This all totally took place.
Yesterday there were two different inspections done. There was a morning inspection done by one of the engineers. There was some additional snow in some additional areas that had not been previously identified as being necessary to remove, that they said, you know what, let's get that off too, even though it wasn't necessarily a concern. So the documentation was in process. We threw people up on the roof to remove some additional snow from one particular area. There were some icicles just hanging from here, you may have seen. They said, remove the icicles. So these were some additional steps that were kind of ongoing while the paperwork was being processed. Photos were taken. A second assessment yesterday afternoon was done. They received photographs. They were satisfied. They received the appropriate documentation from the other engineer, which the night before had not been appropriately worded and did not cover all three areas.
So the appropriate say enough where you all felt comfortable opening the school. It wasn't that.
It wasn't us. They didn't.
It was the engineer.
Right. It was
Okay, so-
The building inspector.
the documentation. So we're talking about engineers who are insured, who are putting the safety of your
Oh,
children.
I want that. I want that person's, everything that person wants to be
Right.
110% done.
Right. So we're talking about the engineers who are insured, who want the documentation to say what it needs.
As if they're wrong.
Can I answer? Thanks. They want the documentation to say what it needs to say because they're putting their license and their careers on the line, and that's understandable, right? In addition, the building commissioner, out of safety, will only accept from licensed and insured engineers certifications that go back to the original assessment and say, okay, this is what we see, this is what needs to be done, and then come forward full circle and say, these things have been done, we are satisfied. So I will tell you that all of those things took all day yesterday to happen. And this document did not get produced until after 5 p.m. yesterday.
But some physical things were done, not
Oh,
just
yeah.
paperwork.
Well, if you-
That's correct.
So that's the
not
thing
there.
that was apparent.
Yeah. Just too quickly, on that item, Katie, we were here, we thought it was gonna be a go. Then, the engineer, when they sent the pictures, they had to get pictures to him by 3:30. He was sort of late in surveying the roof. We get the pictures to him, he said, oh, I don't like that snow there, and he never said it before.
Correct.
So all of a sudden, Katie is now pulling people, Katie Hartman, the custodial supervisor, is pulling people from other schools, and they're running up in the roof, chipping away, and then he said something like, well, what about the ice dams?
Right.
And we finally said, we can't get the ice dams, because now it's not really structural. So that's why it ended up being.
Right, and
And
part,
that's
and
what it seemed like, and
Yeah.
I just wanted to clarify
Right.
that that is in fact
Yeah.
what
Right.
the situation was, because that's very much how it seemed.
right, no, understandably,
That was my question. I was-
right, and that's fine. But to stop in the middle of the day and to let all the parents
I
know,
don't care about that at all.
right, exactly.
Not at all, not even a tiny bit.
So you care about the building being safe and the school being open.
I care about full information about what happened, even just after the fact, knowing that in fact it wasn't just paperwork. That would have been great to be in the thing, just one little sentence. Turns out it was a little bit more than just paperwork. We had a few small corrections we needed to make.
Yeah, and in fact, when
Feel safe.
And in fact, when folks were asking me, and I said, you know what, it's paperwork at this point, it's being processed, I found out about an hour later that they wanted a crew to go back up on the roof.
I mean, most of us have talked to friends who are engineers and said, what's the process, what's going to happen? So
Yeah.
I understand all that.
Yeah.
And it just wasn't meshing. So I wanted to know what it was. And I think a lot of people did.
Right, and it was kind of a moving target during the day. Once we got to a certain point and we thought we were good, they came back and said, oh no, you need to do this. And the problem was that it was the engineer who was saying do this when they weren't the ones, and they were some criticism about the shoring work that was done when they refused and weren't able to design the shoring work and to certify to it. So it was a little challenging dealing with two engineers who were a little bit at odds in the documentation that they wanted.
That means that everything has been covered really well. I love hearing that.
Sure, ideal,
That would have been, that's.
ideal, except if you're trying to get it done
For timing,
and
it's
open
not
a school.
The timing isn't the priority. The priority is the
Okay.
safety of the children.
I understand that, believe me.
It's important to a lot of people, but to me, it's the safety of the children is first and foremost, and the rest of it falls under that.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Not about that. I have a question about the shoring up and the temporary, like right now versus the somewhat temporary, long-term temporary, and then finally, what's the permanent?
Right.
And was the school damaged? Are we gonna have to live with this shoring up, or what?
The shoring will be in place for some time. I don't know how long. There will be some additional work done to that shoring. I don't know what the timetable is for that. The permanent fix of it, my best guess is the time to do that would be this summer. And I don't know exactly what that will entail, but I do not believe that there's any permanent damage. There's certainly no hole in the roof. There was no cave-in, no collapse, as that word was used. No snow ever breached and came into the library. No books were damaged. So it's really just part of the underlying structure that needs to be repaired.
And are there columns in there?
There are.
Like
There are
poly columns?
They're lally columns with supports. There's about 20, 22 of them or so. Yeah. I mean, if I can, so if this is helpful. So it's a drop ceiling. Can anyone see this? You probably can't get this on the camera, and that's okay. So this is something I just drew, right? It's a drop ceiling in the library. So if you can imagine, in the space between the drop ceiling and the roof, there's insulation, but inside there is piping and things like that. And there's steel structure. And it's one beam on top of the other vertically, and then these triangular steel structures. And in a few areas, some of these triangular structures have been bent. Okay? And that bending caused sagging because of the weight of the snow. Okay? So once the snow was removed, the sagging subsided, and now shoring has been put up in those areas where the structure has been compromised. But it's a few areas. It's not throughout everywhere else. Everything's been inspected. There's only the area in the small area in the office and the area in the library. So, sure.
I just wanted to back up with MB said just a little bit more. I appreciate what she's saying about the need to know. And I do hope that, I know there are a lot of parents who would probably love to be here but can't after 2 days
Sure.
of school based on the safety factors. So I think that's great information. Will that come out in an email to the rest of the population? About the shoring or?
Yeah, I don't know if that detail will be, because really I don't know how relevant that is.
I mean, if they need to know. I think people really want to know. I think it would benefit you to let them know.
And that's fine. And I'm not suggesting we're hiding anything at all. I'm just saying when you talk about...
Neither am I.
Okay, but you keep interrupting me and you're a little bit rough. And so I'm...
Worried. I'm just worried.
Okay.
I'm so sorry. I'm worried. It was a difficult decision for me to let my daughter come today.
Okay, and frankly, at the bottom of Dot's email, every time she sends an email about a weather-related incident or anything else, she says, of course, it's a parent's ultimate decision whether or not they feel comfortable sending their child to school under the circumstances. So if you didn't feel comfortable, you certainly could have made that decision.
I did feel comfortable enough to do it.
Okay.
And I don't think that kind of thing was said under the email when we were told to stop asking questions about the snow on the roof. And so that's really where my concern starts, is I was taking pictures and sending pictures to a friend who was in a roof collapse in school when she was a child. And she also understands a great deal about engineering. And she was cautioning me about the roof in the beginning. I mean, I have text with the photos,
Right.
look at this, check out all the snow, and her telling me the story. And then Dot's email came out, and I feel horribly guilty about not just walking into your office and saying, I have this concern. And that's where a lot of my worry is coming from, is the fact that I trusted, and I regret that.
Okay, well that's unfortunate that you regret it, because I will tell you that the administration, the school committee, the principals, the custodial staff, the DPW, the police and fire, and everyone who was involved in this effort didn't have anything but the safety of the staff and the students in mind when it went through every single step from Thursday until yesterday to get to the point we are. So I'm saddened that you regret trusting in the folks that...
I'm sad that you don't wish that I had pushed harder and we discovered this even before vacation. That's what I'm sad hearing that.
I don't know that we would have discovered it.
Right. Okay.
I don't know that we would have. And let me just speak to that. So a lot of people are very critical, okay? And understandably so, and that's fine. Okay? Understandably so. We've all been experiencing historic weather events. You're all having issues with your homes, I'm sure. But the normal course of business is not to remove snow from the roofs necessarily. We've had assessments done on all of the roofs by all the engineers. You know, folks said, well, the building commissioner has been saying for weeks that you should be removing the snow. Actually, that's not true. The first time anything came out via the police department through the building commissioner was on the 20th of February, which was the day after we experienced the situation here. Okay? I will tell you that 4 years ago when we had an issue at the old middle school, okay, there was no reason to expect that the snow load was going to be a problem. Okay? What we experienced there was a combination of events that had to do with poor design and the elements and the age of the building and a number of other things. No reason to believe that the snow on this roof, as light as it was going to have the impact that it did in the particular area. Okay? What we do, we have a protocol in place.
I don't think everybody sees that way.
Okay. We have a protocol in place. After each snowfall, the custodians get up on the roof. They clear the drains, because one of the most important things is when there's water that collects underneath the ice and the snow, that can cause a leak. So they clear the drains. They clear the mechanical equipment. They clear the high drifts. We don't have the manpower, the equipment, or the time to remove snow from all the buildings. Town Hall didn't do it until this weekend. We shared a crane. They had a crane. We got the crane over here. We brought it over to the high school. So it's not something that is normally done because we can't budget for that kind of manpower. We can't budget for the costs that are associated with that. That's just not possible. So you do what you can to take the precautions that make sense, and then you do the best you can to get through a situation when it occurs. And I think this was a huge collaborative effort. It was coordinated by many people in town, and I think it was a successful outcome. There was a school in Bridgewater that had an actual collapse. This was not a collapse. That word was used Thursday, unfortunately, and it became an inflammatory spread around social media, and people were concerned because the word collapse was used. There was no collapse, and the engineers agreed with that, okay? In Bridgewater, you have a school that actually did have a roof cave in. That's closed for the rest of the year. Weymouth was in a similar situation to us and were closed yesterday as well. So we're not alone in this, and in fact, we've weathered this better than most other districts. I don't know that I'm going to be able to satisfy you at all, so I'm sorry.
I think maybe in the interest of time, we should probably.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about Jose kindergarten?
Sure.
I know this is all in our the crazy natural.
I will tell you just real quickly, for those of you who don't know, there was an issue at South School last night. It had nothing to do with snow. Around 8 o'clock, a heating pump failed in the vestibule leading from the bus loop where you go into the gym and the cafeteria in the ceiling. And because the heating pump failed, a sprinkler head froze and burst. Water ran through the hallway, into the gym, into the cafeteria. There was about this much water, a lot of water. I stopped by at 8:15 on my way home, happened to see the fire engine stopped in, and crews were there, cleaned up through the night. School opened this morning. Will some repair work be necessary to floors and other things? Yeah, probably. But school is safe, school is open, school is clean, and it was something that happens and was dealt with. Okay? So just so you have that information, because I don't think everyone got that information overnight, because it happened late and school opened, so there was no reason to cancel school or alarm anybody about anything. So just wanted to talk to you real quickly about kindergarten, also mention the budget a little bit. So as you know and have heard, we've been working on the kindergarten initiative for a couple of years. Who here has kids going into kindergarten in the future? Great, super. So tried to get full-day kindergarten back in '99 before I was here. At that time, we didn't have enough space. We only had 3 elementary schools, and it just wasn't feasible at the time. Fast forward to 2008, and a committee was put together to revisit full-day kindergarten possibilities. Then we had a 4th elementary school. We had the space, and in fact, East was designed specifically to allow for enough space so it could accommodate full-day kindergarten program in the future. That was one of the things when we worked with the MSBA, they wanted to make sure that that was going to be a possible outcome at some point. So there was a lot of discussion about putting into the budget. At that time, it was in for about a moment, and then it was popped out. At that time, it was going to cost about $580,000. And due to the cuts that were necessary to open East School, that was an early casualty and wasn't able to be sustained. I remember in the fall of 2009 coming to a school committee meeting in this room before I ran the first time and speaking about full-day kindergarten, because I was disappointed that it had been taken out of the budget, that we weren't able to get it done. And that was one of the things that I wanted to try to work toward as I thought about running for school committee. And it took a few years as we worked through issues at the middle school and working on a solution for that. And the project at the high school athletic complex and everything that was involved in that. And every year there's always a struggle to kind of weigh everything we need educationally with the amount of money that's available in our budget. So we really decided to talk about it some more in school committee in the fall of 2013. We asked Dr. Gallo and the administration to revisit that 2008 full-day kindergarten report and provide an update the following summer with an eye of maybe implementing as early as the fall of 15, okay? Fast forward to the fall of 14, we received that updated study and started exploring grant and aid from the state that might be available, and we started soliciting feedback from the public on what they might like to see in a kindergarten program and the logistics of that. You know, people ask, well, why do you need full-day kindergarten, right? Why isn't a half-day sufficient? I went to half-day kindergarten back in New York in the early 70s. You know, everything we've been reading for the last few years, and it's not just locally or in the state, it's a national movement, kindergarten is now educationally necessary. And in our opinion, if you believe that kindergarten is educationally necessary because of the things that are demanded of kids at such an early age 5, then why should it be any different than grades 1 or 5 or 7 or 9? And why should it be a full day? And in fact, some of us believe that if it's no different than grade 1 or grade 5 or grade 7, then shouldn't it be free, right? We approached looking at a program with the possibility of making it free. Quickly found that it was going to cost over $800,000 to implement. And that, along with the other things that we're seeking to get in our budget, was just not going to be feasible. Early in the budget process this year, looking at fiscal 16, which starts this July, we talked about the possibility of asking for some town funds to supplement what we were working on in a tuition-based program. And quickly, it became clear that with all the things we were trying to get in the regular budget, that we should move away from that theory. The other thing was we put together what was a pre-registration. Many of you may have seen it, participated in it, a pre-registration survey to find out, okay, with folks with kids coming into kindergarten next fall, you know, would a full day, you know, be good for you? Why wouldn't you send your kid to a full day? And if we had to charge a tuition, is that something you could afford, be willing to pay? So we started to get that feedback. And I think it was about 288 responses that we got, and over 80% responded that yes, full day, yes, we can pay, we want to pay, and we can pay what the top threshold would be. Now, for me, I don't like the idea of charging anybody for public school. It just goes against everything I believe in public education. But if I'm given the choice of having full-day kindergarten and not, I choose full-day kindergarten. And the hope is that over time, next 3-5 years, something like that, and we've already begun the discussion with the selectmen and the advisory committee about moving toward a program that could be funded within the budget and move away from the tuition-based system. Other towns have done it, I think North Andover, Situate, so it is possible. Rockland, I'm sorry, not Situate, Rockland. So it certainly is possible, and it's just a matter of finding a way to work it into our budget, and I think over time we'll be able to do that. There is still a 22-member committee that continues to meet and is working on aspects of program development. We have sent the sliding scale fee structure to the Commonwealth for its approval, and we expect that within the next week or two. And for those of you who didn't see, it'll be essentially a 3-tiered fee structure with the first 3 tiers being free. The first level being $750, then $1,750, $2,625, and then $3,500. Those will be yearly charges. They'll be payable in installments or upfront. So depending on where you land in income scale, those will be the charges. The state puts a cap at $4,000 on what you can charge. And when we looked at the numbers and the demographics of Hingham and what made sense based on our Kids in Action program, our integrated program, and what those charges were, we arrived at the $3,500 as the appropriate kind of cap for that. Others thought, well, why not charge more? Well, why charge more? If you don't need to, then why? We're really looking forward to moving this forward. The nice thing about not having it in the budget is we don't have to wait for town meeting approval. This is going to happen in the fall of 15. So in this building, there will be full-day kindergarten. In the other 3 schools, there will be full-day kindergarten. Some people have concerns about whether they think their kids are ready for a full day, the transition, what that will entail. Other folks have questions about special needs and IEPs, either the financial aspect of it or the learning aspect of it and what that'll entail. All those details will be made known as the program is further developed. I can tell you that at this point, it looks like the program for kids with special needs will be really no different than things are now in grades 1 through 5, where they'll be in regular classrooms with other kids and they'll be pull out as necessary for certain aspects of learning. So that's the hope. Kids will be able to go in their home district. So a kid who lives in the PRS district won't have to go to East for kindergarten. So that's good. It seems to be, based on the survey results that we got, a pretty even spread of kids in town of where they're living in the 4 districts. So that should work out. All the numbers we kind of estimated were based on the thought that we might have as many as 300 kids, 15 classrooms. It may be a little bit less than that. We're not quite sure. But the fact that we got 288 responses, you could throw out about 20 or 25 of those as folks who really wanted to respond but had kids going in the year after or whatever. But over 250 responses that I think we can count on having a solid number in kindergarten in the fall. That's really, and kids with IEPs entering kindergarten will be free. There will be no charge, regardless of income. So that's a good thing to know for parents. And I'm happy to take questions on that, if there are any. Yes?
So there won't be currently we have one full-day kindergarten class where all the kids are on IEPs and then they have their peer models. Now that's what you meant when you said it'll look like first grade, like the kids on IEPs with special needs will be
Mixed in.
Yeah.
Everybody's together.
All the classrooms,
Yeah,
all the kindergarten classrooms will be the same. There won't be one with peer mod.
Yeah.
They'll all be the same.
So those decisions are not quite final yet. There's still programmatic stuff that the educators are working on discussing, but preliminary discussions have and Dr. Gallo has said that seems to make the most sense and seems to be the way that they're going. And I think it would be easier, particularly where the makeup of the kids are, and certainly you don't want kids going from one district to another and having to change schools, and you want it to be as seamless as possible, and our goal is really to make it no different than first grade or fifth grade. The experience should be the same. The benefit of full-day kindergarten is that there'll be additional learning time. There'll also be additional play time, creative play. There'll be time to work on social and emotional development. There'll be time to have a snack. There'll be time to have recess, where sometimes you don't have that time in 2 hours and 35 minutes. So, I really think it's a great step forward. Really appreciative of folks stepping up and saying, you know what, we're willing to pay. And it's unfortunate it has to be that way, at least initially. But the hope is, as I said, that we can move away from a tuition program in the next few years.
And Ray, those parents that do not want to have their child in full day, they can still do a half day, they can still have
Right.
that?
So folks use the word option. So there really is no half-day option. We are going to have full-day kindergarten in Hingham. However, because we're charging a fee, the state requires us to continue to offer our half-day program for a half-day kindergarten for free. We've decided that half-day should not be 2 hours and 35 minutes, but really 3 hours and 5 minutes, which is half of 6:10, which is the full day for elementary. So, number one, for those few that do decide that the full day isn't appropriate for whatever reason, they don't want to pay, they can't pay, and if they can't pay, we could still work something out. I think no one's going to be turned away because they can't afford to go, right? Even if on paper they can afford to go, but in reality they can't, and there's a lot of folks in town who are like that, and people may not realize that, but on paper you may make X, but in reality you got 4 kids and you got this obligation and that obligation, and maybe it's just tough to come up with an extra $1,000 or whatever it is. We get that. Believe me, I have 4 kids of my own. It's not cheap. For those few, and hopefully it's only a few because we think the benefits of the full day will be great for everybody, there will be an opportunity to kind of leave early. And that's really what it'll be. It'll be everyone starting in the morning and leaving early. Yeah. Yes. Yes.
I've been told that there'll be a dual certified teacher at each school in the district.
Yeah, so part of what we have in the budget, well, so there's 2 things. Part of it is being funded by the kindergarten aspect, which is going to be funded by tuition, and part of it is going to be funded by our regular education budget, is to add the teachers and add the special education certified teachers. So the plan is to have 1 of each in every classroom. Yeah.
I know we're.
So I'm in support of it, and I have a daughter coming to kindergarten, so
Yeah.
it's a full day, but I do have a little concern if you're just the option for removing your child on a half day,
Yeah.
that they're missing out, or,
Yep. And they might.
not to pay, they're
Yeah.
kind of forced.
I understand, and that's the unfortunate nature of what we need to do. It's because logistically, it's just really not feasible. There isn't enough space to provide for a separate half-day program where there wouldn't be, you could put the kids that only want to go half-day someplace, and then you wouldn't have to have the disruption or the. It's a real challenge with the transportation as well. Because as you know, we have our own buses, but they service all the schools. And the reason why 2 of the elementary schools are on one timetable and the others are on the other is for the buses. That's the reason. So the logistics and the space are a huge problem. Because we talked about that. We spent time on that. We said, well, wait a minute. What about people who just say, my wife says, people shouldn't have to pay for kindergarten. It's ridiculous. And I agree with her. But I don't feel strongly enough about it to say I'm not willing to have full-day kindergarten. That was the choice. That was the choice. You can either do it this way or you can do it that way. And, it quickly became, and Sarah knows, her husband's on the advisory committee. They make the decisions about our budget and recommend the town meeting. And so it's all your fault. No, her husband's great. We see each other at night quite a bit at meetings.
Ray and Jim were together more than I.
That's right. That's true. But there's only so much money for the school department. There's only so much money for DPW, for fire, for police, for elder services, for all the things that we want in town. And certainly the school department takes up the largest chunk of that, but there is a limit. And there's also folks who feel that, sustainability is a concern. If you raise school budget year to year a certain amount, well, how can you possibly sustain that year over year when we don't have the same revenue in a particular year? If we don't have new growth, the shipyard is built out. Linden Ponds isn't going to build out anymore. Black Rock isn't done. If you don't have that new growth that's going to produce that revenue, then how do you afford to pay for increasing budgets when it's just not there? So there are folks that use that word sustainability and are very concerned about adding something now that's going to be in the base next year and then add on top of that. And that's a good segue into budget, because what we're dealing with right now is a situation where we're faced with not only the hopes of increasing our regular education budget because of contractual obligations with the teachers and paras and all the other unions, which they're extremely entitled to. We settled with all of the unions. We had a great settlement. It was actually a good experience negotiating, when at times in the past it hasn't always been as easy. But I think both folks on both sides of the table feel like they walked away with a good deal for themselves and for the town. But those things cost money, and year over year, it probably costs 3.5% to 4% increase year over year just to keep the doors open with the teachers in and the utilities and all the things that we have to pay for. Well, you can only raise taxes 2.5%. So if you're not raising taxes, and in fact, last year the town started to not use the full levy capacity, and that's a new thing. So while they may raise their taxes, they're not spending it. So if you're not spending all that you can raise, but yet your budgets are going up at a higher rate, where's that money going to come from? So it's a struggle to get through, and in this particular year, we're faced with rising special education costs. Our out-of-district tuitions have increased, and the number of kids we're anticipating for next year has increased. And unfortunately, that's not something that can be controlled. Those kids need the education, they deserve the education, and we're required to provide it out of district, but we can't control what they charge. Some schools charge $230,000 for a tuition, and it needs to be paid. We have to provide the transportation as well, and that's fine. But we have to balance those costs with what we're trying to accomplish for all the other kids, and it's very difficult. And typically, we've been fortunate in past years where the advisory committee and the selectmen have kind of held us harmless for the special education budget, because you've got to provide those services, they're needed services. And so if you need to make cuts, those come from the regular education budget. But then you've got those kids who maybe don't get that additional teacher they need, or don't get that initiative that they need, or can't get that additional technology equipment, or whatever it is. So it's a tough balancing act. And this year, when we have special education costs rising and our anticipated reimbursement from the state is going to be lower, it's a particular challenge. Last year, we had reduced special education costs and we had a higher reimbursement. So we ended up closing the year with leftover money in special education. And we returned it to town, it went to the bottom line, and it helps our overall financial situation. This year, we have increased costs and lower reimbursement. So it's a real challenge when that is coupled with what we're trying to accomplish in regular education. Budget votes were supposed to happen this week. They've been delayed a week because of all of the things that have been going on. If you're not aware, we're trying to buy a water company. The trial for that started Monday. So officials are in town at Superior Court in the business litigation section trying to find out what a judge thinks the water company costs so that we can move forward or not. That'll be your decision at town meeting at some point in the future. So that's going on this week. Obviously, issues with schools and snow and everything else. So budget votes have been put off about a week. But it's really important that, if you can't attend meetings, we certainly understand that, come out to town meeting. Read your warrant ahead of time, be involved in the process, because that's really, you guys make this government work. You guys make the decision by showing up and voting. This is one of the few last bastions of true democracy in America. You get to show up at a place and vote, and your vote counts. You should take advantage of it. It's a rare privilege. So town meeting is April 27th this year. The budget votes come up Article 5 and 6 the first night. And we'll be in there, school budget. So hopefully we can get through this, work together collaboratively with the town, and come to a number that balances and is fair and reasonable, and we can get as much as we can for the kids, because that's what we're trying to accomplish. Yes.
When you say out of district for special education needs, are you meaning out of this town of Hingham?
Private schools, correct. So when I say district, that's Hingham, public schools. So out of district, say they're going to a school up in Beverly for a particular learning disability, or they're going to the South Shore Collaborative. They live in Hingham, but they go to there are some residence schools, but a few. Most of the kids live in home and they travel to day schools out of district. And this year, I believe we have 46 out of district special education students. I think next year we're projected to have 56 or 57 out of district students. And we don't just come up with that number. We know the kids, we know the schools, we know what the tuitions are, and all of those things go into the budget in the proposal. So that's the out-of-district situation.
The average is, and I know you mentioned like 200,000. Is that
Yeah,
average?
so many of the kids go to the Collaborative, South Shore Collaborative, or other similar schools. I think the tuitions are in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, something like that for the most part. Then there are these particular schools that have $150,000, $200,000.
Very small.
It is a small group, but it's a huge number. I mean, you recall a couple of years ago, while we were going through the budget process, in January, we learned that 3 kids were moving into town that were going to out-of-district placement schools, and the tuitions combined for those 3 kids were going to cost $533,000. So we were in the process, and it happened in January, so we're making the joint presentation to advisory and the selectmen, and how do you budget for another $500,000 like that? It's impossible. So we were able to work with the town to find that money. And it was a great effort to kind of, and at the end of the day, those kids were here briefly and then moved out again. We were still responsible for those tuitions for the year, but then the next year we were able to make it up and there was money left over. So it does kind of balance out. This year is a particular struggle because of the increased costs and the decreased reimbursements. Any other questions?
Can we hold this, your last question, and
One
then,
quick
I'm
question
sorry,
back to
guys.
kindergarten.
Sure.
Has the school committee ever discussed approaching a red shirting that's going on in this town?
Yeah. So, right. So the question was using the term red shirt, which, if you're familiar with college, an athlete, right. Well, just for the folks at home who may not understand, if you're an athlete in college and maybe you have an injury or some other issue, right, it preserves your eligibility as an athlete for the next year. So you redshirt, you are on the team, but you don't participate, you've still got that eligibility left. In Hingham and certainly other places as well, it's become an increasing custom for parents of children, particularly born in summer, late in the year. Our cutoff is you have to be 5 by September 1, before September 1. So kids born in June, July, August, or kids who perhaps aren't as developmentally along as others, or are a little bit immature, or for whatever reason. Parents make personal decisions, and that's certainly, their prerogative. But there has been an increasing custom to either have kids repeat kindergarten, hold kids back from starting kindergarten when they're 5 and have them do it at 6. I know a few select people who do it for athletic reasons, interestingly. We have discussed the phenomenon. We have not discussed an approach to do anything about it. I don't think there's anything we can or should do about it. It's certainly a parent's decision on when they feel their child is ready to attend school. So,
Ray, thank you.
thank you.
We need to keep moving on, and I apologize. We have a full agenda.
Yeah, and I'm happy to answer other questions. People know how to reach me, I think.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to answer questions, talk on the phone, email. This should air on HCAM at some point. So, tell your friends and they can tune in if they missed anything, they want to get some questions answered or need some information. Specific, curriculum or educational issues should probably be directed to Dr. Gallo at central office. She's best suited to answer those questions. And thanks very much for having me.
Ray, thank you. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Thank you. A lot of information on a lot of different topics. We appreciate all that you do for us.
Thank you.
So, all right, Mr. Cormier, the principal's report. All right.
Oh. Are you still filming? So real quickly, let's just talk about that. So yeah, the one thing we didn't touch on was the snow days. So people are concerned about this, and we have begun talking about this. So right now, the last day of school is the 24th, perhaps the 25th for PRS. That's if we use June days, okay? We began the discussion a few weeks ago on how to approach this, because obviously we had 6 days, and now we got 7 and then 8 for PRS. It's a lot of days. 5 days built in by requirement of statute to the calendar, 180 days required of kids 900 hours in elementary, 990 hours in middle school and high school, for those of you to understand how it works out. And we have begun discussing a few different options. Pretty much everybody in the school committee agrees that taking days from April vacation does not make sense. Nobody likes that idea, and I have no vacation plans. But maybe I'll go away now, I don't know. So we've kind of dismissed that as a possibility. The things that we have talked about, and Dr. Gallo has begun talking to principals and some of the teachers about options as well, maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays. And what the administration has done to create the possibility for that is, these early release days once a month, every Wednesday. The next 2 early release days have been taken, and they'll be full days. That would allow Saturdays to be half days and still count as full days because we've swapped, right? Yep. We did that 4 years ago with the middle school because the middle school missed a couple of extra days because of the snow, and those days had to be made up, and it was done on Saturdays. They swapped the early release days, and they were made up essentially as half days. I think they were done by noon, okay? So that's certainly a possibility we're looking at for the whole district and for PRS in particular, so there could be some combination. We've looked at Good Friday. We're starting to talk about Good Friday. I know a lot of folks are concerned about Good Friday. I go to church, I take my kids to the movies. That's what we do on Good Friday, okay? Other people do other things. They travel, they have family, whatever it is. That's what we've talked about. In fact, I got an email last night from DOT, which contained the results of a survey that other superintendents had shared with other districts facing this particular issue, and what they were doing about it and what their approach about it was. And there were a lot that were considering the Good Friday as an option. Folks have mentioned Memorial Day, tougher holiday, I think. So on the table, but not likely, I would guess. The other options are days in June. So we were supposed to end on the 15th. Now we're at the 24th, perhaps the 25th. If we were able to use a couple of Saturdays and Good Friday, that would back it up a little bit. We don't necessarily have to make up all the days. We can go into June. And keep in mind that ending a little later in June this year is not as bad because Labor Day is the latest it can possibly be next fall. We don't start school until September 8th. So, and it would be September 9th or 10th or 11th for kindergarten. So you got that extra week built into September. So if you lose a couple days in June, you've got that extra time on the back end. We've talked about starting school earlier before Labor Day. Nobody likes that idea. Labor Day is sacred, right? It's summer. In fact, going to school in September is tough when it's still 80 degrees out. So I would tell you that's unlikely to happen. A lot of other districts do it. In Connecticut, they start before Labor Day, but I will tell you that they don't end any earlier than we do. They take 2 weeks at Christmas. They take other breaks that we don't do. So, I think we have a good calendar that starts right after Labor Day, ends in mid-June generally, except the seniors at the high school get an exemption and they graduate earlier this year. I think it's May 30th. So that's the combination. It's maybe 1 or 2 Saturdays, Good Friday perhaps, some days in June. That's what we're seem to be looking at. We're going to talk more about it on March 2nd. We're meeting to vote our budget on March 2nd at 7:30. And a decision will be made, I think, before the 16th of March, one way or the other. We do have to have a discussion with the teachers about it. They've indicated they want to bargain about it. We've approached them in a very informal way. And in fact, at the meeting the other night, I asked the president of the teachers union, what are your people saying? What do you think? What do you like? Just trying to get the conversation going. So it seems like we're kind of on the same page. They're not as fond of the Saturday option. We'll try to work that out. So I think we'll get there, and not everyone will be happy about, what we decide, but I think it'll be reasonable and fair for most people, and we'll just get through it together. So, yes.
I watched the school committee
Yeah.
meeting the other night, and I know a couple days were tossed around as potential Saturdays,
Yeah,
the 21st and the 28th.
I think that's right. My memory, yeah.
So should we just start thinking that could be a potential, like that?
It couldn't hurt to think that could be, right?
Just because the 21st.
And I think the plan is, if we're going to do Saturdays, is to try to choose Saturdays that don't have major conflicts like trips or, you know, things going on, testing or whatever it is. So I think those were identified. And so this shows you like the time and the effort the administration puts into looking at things like this. Even when things are going on around them, they're focused on the other things because they have to be. So I think that's fair to perhaps expect that if we're going to choose Saturdays, that those might be, again, not decided yet. Yeah, yeah. Thanks very much. Great.
I will say that